Hello! Welcome to our Pecha Kucha that will talk about the relationship between mathematics, language arts, and literacy. This presentation is by Ali, Catherine, and Elizabeth. When we began our research, a key definition from the Journal of Humanities and Social Studies stood out to us, and this is how we will frame the rest of our presentation. The primary function of language in mathematics instruction is to enable both the teacher and the learner to communicate mathematical knowledge with precision. So, how can a teacher ensure their students can communicate their mathematical knowledge? They can begin with vocabulary. Do your students know the meaning of some of the main words you'll be using in your lessons? Your vocabulary will change year to year depending on what grade you're teaching, but make sure your students know what you're talking about before you start teaching them. Did you know that when you're writing, you're engaging both hemispheres of your brain? If our students can learn to write about their mathematical learnings, they'll be using one part of their brain to generate an idea and the other part to structure that information. This can help students transform their learning into long-lasting knowledge. Have you ever noticed that while you're writing something out by hand, your brain has to slow your thoughts down to make your handwriting make sense? The same thing happens when we learn to process what we're reading. Writing and using language forces students to slow their thinking down and ensure long-lasting understanding.
We are now going to go over some strategies that teachers can use to connect literacy to math. There are plenty of ways that math and literacy learning support one another. Here are 6 ideas that you can use in your classroom. Here we go. A great way to engage students and to get them thinking about a particular math concept is to read picture books that incorporate the specific math concept or skill that the students are learning. Here are a few examples of primary storybooks for fractions, sorting and classifying, and counting. Number 2, word problems. When we're doing word problems in math, we are using written language to describe a math problem and to communicate our solution. These problems can be posed by the teacher, found in math workbooks, or found online. It's important to make sure word problems are relevant and meaningful for students. Taking it one step further, you can use student-led problems and solutions. Ask students to write down a problem for a peer to solve. Ask students to write down how they solved a particular problem. Teach them to give a great explanation of how they solved it. Have students write out step-by-step instructions for a particular problem and the application of these steps. This promotes a deeper understanding of the math concept. Students can also work on solving math problems together. This could involve having students verbally describe how they solved the problem to each other, write down how they would explain a certain math concept to a friend, and allowing students to ask each other for help when solving math problems or completing math tasks. This helps them practice their communication and collaboration skills. Another strategy for deepening understanding of math concepts is to ask students to describe and point out a mistake that they made in solving a math problem. Explaining a mistake and thinking about what they would have done differently helps solidify understanding and has the student work with the concept in a different way. Remember, mistakes are learning. Finally, exit tickets are a great way to quickly check for understanding for different math concepts. This could be a quick math problem for the students to solve, a conceptual understanding question like, why do you need a common denominator when adding fractions? Or it could be a reflective question, such as, how do you feel about this math concept? What questions do you have? These could be verbal or written.
There are many challenges that come to light when analyzing the relationship between mathematics, language, and literacy. First, there is a potential math-language barrier, as the students may not even have the vocabulary for math words. Second, for ESL students, language curriculum is difficult enough for them without the added language of math. And third, students with special needs or learning difficulties can find it hard to understand or communicate needs. The language of math is intricate and has its own vocabulary. Words like divisor, multiplication, and denominator may sound overwhelming to some students. Math achievement may then in turn be hampered by a lack of knowledge of the concepts underlying these phrases. A simple way to face this challenge head on in the classroom is for teachers to use manipulatives and visual representation of problems to aid students in understanding new math concepts at the early stage of learning. Math is a universal language. When speaking in numbers, however, if English is your second language, it can be difficult to use the words or gain understanding in math lessons. The technical language of math can discourage some students and cause them to doubt their own abilities. This problem can be even more prevalent for English language learners who, on top of trying to learn math concepts, are trying to learn the language of math within the context of a first new language, English. When looking at the challenges that language may bring, it's important to remember students with learning disabilities and special needs. There are students who are nonverbal or who have low verbal skills and struggle with receptive or expressive language disorders. It's our job to be knowledgeable about our students and have an in depth understanding of their IEP and needs. Make sure to check in to see how our students are doing, ask specific questions, and make use of accommodations and modifications given by the spec ed teacher. Some ways to help. Math performance doesn't have to be hampered by language if the proper strategy is taken. 4 strategies that teachers can use to assist students are as follows. 1. To lower barriers to entry, introduce math concepts without using any language. 2. Respect and use the language and math knowledge and understanding that students may already have. Students often come to us with a strong background in mathematics. Although they may not be familiar with the formal language used to describe that math, they are aware of the concepts. 3. Once students can see that they do understand the underlying math concepts, they can be introduced to the formal math vocabulary. And 4, make sure to verbally articulate what students need help with before offering assistance or further instruction. Use visual aids if needed to clarify, and use technology to your advantage, and utilize apps like ABC Mouse, Adapted Mind, and IXL. The goal of teaching and learning math is not to be able to compute or work through algorithms or memorize facts. It's to understand, to comprehend the meaning of all the numbers and their connections to each other, and then apply that to real life. Some discussion questions. Do you remember language being used in your early math classes? How would you apply one of these suggestions in your future classroom? And can you think of some additional resources and apps that utilize technology in this relationship between math and language? Thank you. Any questions?